reasons. Particularly one of my co-panelists came down with COVID this weekend. But I'm never shy about taking extra time to talk, so you'll have the pleasure of my company for the next hour or so to talk about alternative revenue streams to insurance. One of the themes that I think I've seen here today, sitting through the previous discussions, is that there does seem to be a lot of concern about mitigating risk. This morning's session talked about how do you mitigate risk by expanding to other states so that you're not constrained by the regulatory practices of one state. And I do think that's one viable strategy. But I would challenge you to think outside the box of insurance reimbursement, which is the go-to for most revenue streams for ABA. So I'm going to expand your mind a little bit today and talk about some alternatives that have worked for me as well as for some of our clients. So first of all, who am I? My name is Dan Dube. I'm a veteran of two different industries over the 40 years that I've been in a career. The first 25 years of my career were in the world of software, and during that part of my career, I started a software company 20 years ago this week, actually, which was the first cloud publishing software for the publishing industry. So I spent a lot of time in New York back in those days, in New Jersey. And then after that exit, I moved into the world of ABA because I married a BCBA. And we have 3 adult kids out of 4 with autism, so it was very personal to us. So we started a company called Compass in New Hampshire. We were the first Medicaid provider in that state, and we grew that company to be the largest provider in that state. And then we exited in 2021, stayed on with a national company in executive roles for a couple years, and then decided that the values probably weren't quite aligned the way we wanted them to be. So we picked up and moved to Florida, and now what we do is we provide coaching for other ABA providers. So we have a company called ABA Growth Team. It's founded by me, who's sort of the business, marketing, financial guy, and my wife, who is now a BCBAD, who is very strong on the clinical and OBM side. And between the two of us, over the 15 years that we've been running ABA companies, we have seen every issue you can possibly imagine, and there were no mentors for us. So we made every mistake in the book, and that's why we feel qualified to help our clients now. So today's topic, why should we be talking about alternative revenue streams in ABA? Let's just take a look at the headlines just from the last few weeks. Centria, huge ABA provider, has been barred from the state of Arizona, and they're suing the state of Arizona for being dropped from their Medicaid. Rates, network tightening, scrutiny, there's a lot of consolidation among smaller providers being acquired. Some providers are leaving states, like Texas is notoriously bad for very low rates of reimbursement and for it being difficult to work with. And then just in general, the market's a mess. And the big, beautiful bill getting passed in last year, if that actually survives, Medicaid's going to be gutted. And in a year from now, if your only means of revenue is insurance reimbursement, you are at risk of holding the bag and potentially failing. So it's not too early to start thinking about what other options there might be. The reality of ABA now, states are trying to cut reimbursement rates. We've seen North Carolina cut their rates or trying to cut their rates by 10%. That's just one small example. By the way, a lot of you are taking pictures of the slides. There's going to be a QR code at the end. You can download the whole presentation. So sit back and enjoy. You don't have to worry about missing anything on the slides. Medicaid and commercial payers are closing their networks. I'm down in Florida now, and I work with a lot of young companies that can't get credentialed by anybody because all the networks are closed, even though the providers that are out there have huge wait lists. Commercial providers are not negotiating rates. I have clients that have had the same rate for 10 years. The cost of living's gone up a lot in 10 years, but the rates have stayed the same. It's just continuing to squeeze providers' bottom lines. Their providers are taking longer to get paid, and there's more denials, there's more paperwork, there's more calling somebody and not getting a human on the line, or calling twice and getting two different answers. We've heard some of that in the last presentation. Payers are looking for improved outcomes. We heard that in the panel this morning. It's very much in your best interest to have strong KPIs to make sure you're tracking outcomes. And some states, we heard earlier today as well, Illinois is a great example that they're trying to eliminate the large PE-backed companies by going to a model that will be 100% clinician-owned companies. So these are just examples of working with insurance. And if you own an ABA business right now, raise your hand if you struggle with working with insurance companies. That's a surprisingly small number of you. So I'm going to give you some different perspectives, different things to think about that don't involve getting revenue from insurance. And I'm really proud of the fact that this is something that I identified 10 years ago as a problem when we owned Compass, which is that we're very dependent on these payers, and 65% of our client base was Medicaid because we were the only Medicaid provider in New Hampshire for many, many years. So we were very Medicaid dependent, and it made me nervous. And then we saw problems with some of the commercial payers, made us very nervous. So I was always looking, what can we be doing to balance out that revenue stream and to fight the peaks and valleys of, hey, I was expecting $30K from this payer this week and it didn't arrive and I have to make payroll. That's very stressful. I had dark hair when we started Compass, and it turned my hair white. So we're going to talk about a few different areas. The first one I'm going to talk about is school. And this is what I consider the low-hanging fruit. Schools are a great alternative source of revenue for a lot of reasons. I'm going to talk in particular about 3 different models that we have experience working with in the school district arena. Contracting people directly, BCBAs and RBTs, that one is pretty commonly known. Second one that's somewhat commonly known is you can start your own school. And then the third one is not well known, but one that we had the most success with, which I call the collaborative classroom model. So I'm going to talk about these before I move on into some of these other areas. But first of all, I love school funding. School funding is great for a lot of reasons. For one, the skills are very transferable. If you have RBTs and BCBAs who are used to working with special needs children, those skills adapt very well into the classroom environment, especially when they're mixed in with neurotypical peers. So it's a very good match to be able to transition over to a school environment. The other thing I love about it is because school districts have budgets, and they have to spend their budget in that school year or they will lose it the next year. So they're very eager to make sure that they spend that budget money. So when you contract with a school district, they pay their bills on time. So it's the exact opposite of insurance reimbursement. It's steady, predictable funding. So that really helps to balance out some of those peaks and valleys. And that provides the cash flow buffer that I like to see. I hate having to know, like, 1 week we're going to have a lot of money coming in, the next Monday we have nothing coming in, but you still have a payroll to make. So having that to kind of equal out the peaks and valleys of insurance reimbursement really is very helpful. One thing that's important to talk about when you're working with school districts versus working with insurance payers. Insurance payers do not like to pay for services delivered in a school. Why? Because there's a fine line between what is medically necessary services and what are academic support services. So it's important to have a little context. School districts are measured against a standard called FAPE, a fair and appropriate education. And that is essentially ensuring that students who have special needs have accommodations made that allow them to learn theoretically at the same level as their neurotypical peers. That is very different than what a medically necessary autism diagnosis type of set of services involved. So ABA therapy services, when they're paid for by insurance, have to be focused on things like communication skills, daily living skills, not academics. They specifically rule out academics. So it's important that if a school district says, hey, I want you to come in and work with this student and bill insurance for the service, just because they can't keep up in class, insurance company's going to deny that. It's the school district's responsibility to make sure that that student has an education and an IEP that supports them achieving FAPE. So having said that, the first area of support for schools that most companies look to if they're going to go down this road is to contract resources directly to school districts. So they will contract a BCBA who might write behavior plans. They might put in an RBT who will act as a paraprofessional for a student, and not necessarily a student with autism. It may be a student who has suffered trauma or has some other type of intellectual delays. So that's what the typical scenario is, that you'll contract people directly into a school district, and you'll be paid at some type of rate for their time. So it's very similar to insurance. You're billing hourly rates as a fee-for-service type of application. The second option, and this is one that we actually did with Compass, we opened Compass Academy because we saw that there were a lot of older school-age kids, and I say older, I say, elementary age to middle school age, who were really struggling and were not benefiting from an education. They were in a self-contained classroom, or they essentially were just being babysat in a room and were not able to accept academic instruction. And a lot of those parents were pulling their kids out of school and homeschooling them and sending them to our clinics all week. And the school districts hated us because of that. So I wanted to try and repair that relationship, and I said, what can we do? And they said, if you open up a private school that we could place these students with, that would be advantageous, because then we know they'll get the type of support that they need. And I had interest from several different school districts about this. So I did some research, and it really, in the state of New Hampshire, it wasn't really hard. It took us about 6 months to convert one of our clinics to be co-located as a school, a private, non-public school. And that allowed us to be able to offer academic services that the school districts would pay us directly for. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the challenges. I have another couple slides a little later on. It's going to talk about some of the challenges that we saw. But that model does work. And in our current role as coaches, I have probably 5 different clients who have a co-located school and an ABA clinic, and that model has worked very well. Some states like Florida, Ohio, have autism scholarships that there is money available to help fund academic support for children who qualify, and that might be a great way to supplement insurance-based reimbursement. This third one is kind of a newer type of model. It's one that we implemented in the last days of Compass right before COVID. We called it the collaborative classroom. So if you think of the private school as send your students to us, the collaborative classroom idea is let us bring our team to you. And so what we did was we essentially created a virtual clinic inside of in a classroom in a school building, and staffed it with our team. So let me just talk a little bit about the problem. School districts, if they have challenging children that they are not able to accommodate with their own staff, they typically have 3 options. They put them in a self-inclusive classroom, which is really a horrible situation for the kids, and the kid doesn't benefit at all. The second one, as I mentioned, is out-of-district placement, so a private school like we created, or other schools that are out there that specialize in special needs kids, or they will hire their own staff, which is very expensive for a school district. None of these really work well, and I've already kind of talked about why. The self-inclusive classroom is really just babysitting. Out-of-district placement is very expensive for a school district, and they're very money conscious. They typically get an allocation of money per student for the whole academic year, And if they have to take a huge portion of that budget for one student to send them to an alternative school placement, that can be well over $100,000 a year just for that one student. So they're very budget conscious about that. And oftentimes these schools are an hour or more drive away. So these kids are in, they're working more than we are. They're in buses for 2 hours a day and then in a specialized school. And then hiring specialized staff, again, very expensive. So the approach that we came up with, we called the collaborative classroom. And this, as I mentioned, was a virtual ABA center where we truly collaborated with the school district. So what did we do? We put in a BCBA full-time in a classroom, and then we put in one RBT for each student in the classroom. The classroom would support anywhere from 4 to 8 students, 4 being the minimum. And it happened right in the school. So it addressed a lot of the issues. School districts are very concerned with the least restrictive environment. They want as much as possible for special needs students to be in the same location as neurotypical students. So that's the least restrictive environment. By definition, being in the neighborhood school is the way to accomplish that. So what we did was we put the BCBA, the RBTs, collaborated. We did not take over the IEP. We collaborated with the school's special ed department. They wrote an IEP for each student, and then we took the IEP and we adapted it to an ABA treatment plan. So the BCBA was overseeing a classroom, teaching with ABA practices and meeting the IEP goals. So it's a truly collaborative process. This was a huge success, and I will say that the first one that we did ended when COVID shut down all the schools. But what we were told by the staff and by the parents is that the kids made more progress in that school year than they had made in the previous 3 years. It's truly what I think a vision of what the future of this could be, and not one penny of insurance funding to fund this. So I'm not gonna, I know that we're a little short on time. I will have a lot to talk about. If anybody's interested in learning more about this, feel free to stop by after, and I'll be happy to talk to you. Just to give you an idea, though, from a pricing model, this is just sample pricing. This is what we priced it at in 2019. But essentially, for a classroom of 4 people, we collected over $300,000 in a school year, and there was no overhead. We were using the school's facilities. The only cost was the labor. So this was a lucrative thing, and the school districts loved it because I took the annual cost, split it over the 10 months of the school year, so there was a predictable amount they had to pay, and there was a predictable amount that I was collecting every month, which again helps smooth out a lot of the peaks and valleys of insurance reimbursement. Okay, I want to talk a little bit, alternative too, about some private pay options. I'm not going to dwell on this because a lot of people have investigated private pay, but I did want to just mention a couple of trends that we're seeing. One is there's a lot of talk over the last couple of years about a parent-led model or a parent training model, where a BCBA will work directly with a set of parents. Instead of bringing in RBTs to work with the family, a BCBA will work with parents, maybe spend 2 to 4 hours a week training them and then teaching the parents how to take data, and then meeting with the parents on a weekly basis. This is something that's very well suited for a private pay model, and guess what? You don't need to go get an authorization for it. You don't have to to submit claims and wait to get reimbursed. This is something that works very well on a private pay basis. But typically, there's going to be some limitations because it's 2 to 4 hours a week is probably all most families could afford, and even that would probably add up quickly. The second one is if you're a clinic-based provider in particular, there are options to do things like vacation and summer camps. This can be an opportunity. A lot of parents who have, and I have 3 kids with autism, I know what this was like when they were younger. Finding somebody who will take those kids during the summertime or during the vacation breaks when you have to work, it can be very challenging. So if you have an ABA clinic that is well suited to that kind of thing, that is something that you might be able to do as a private pay, and no autism diagnosis required. It could be children who have suffered from trauma or other behavioral issues, and it's a great alternative for them. And so inclusive programs like this are another wave that we're seeing a lot more of. I'm going to touch on this. I know it was touched upon in some earlier talks, and one of my colleagues on the panel who couldn't join us was really going to talk more on this topic. But if the networks are closed, or they're not willing to negotiate rates with you, I can speak from personal experience that going on a network is a good alternative option. And I will name names. When we had Compass, in 2019, all of the codes changed to CPT codes. I used that as an opportunity to renegotiate rates with every payer. One of the payers was Cigna, completely unwilling, even though we had demonstrated great outcomes. We were servicing a lot of their clients. We had done a good job. We met every criteria that would justify an increase. They absolutely flatly refused. So we gave them our notice. And then we told all the families, I'm sorry, we're leaving the network. If you want to stay with us, you can stay as out of network. A lot of them did. And we billed at $10 an hour higher than the rate we were asking for, and they paid it. So it doesn't make any sense to me, but I feel bad because the families have to end up eating more. But don't be afraid to say no. The more that you put up with bad rates from payers, the more they're going to keep doing it. So I would encourage you, don't be afraid to stand up and say, I need to make this or we have to leave. All right, now I'm going to get into some really creative ideas. But again, these are all things that we have done. So transportation is a topic that I love to talk about because most ABA providers that I talk to about transportation, they get very nervous and say, we can't be driving kids, and what about the liability? How much is that going to cost me? If you do transportation the right way, and I'll talk about this, but this is the model that we followed when we set up. As far as I know, we're the only ABA company that had a fleet of vans that were certified school buses with certified school bus drivers and an RBT on every van to manage the behaviors. I don't think anybody else has done that. And that turned out to be very, very good for us, and I'll talk about that. I'm going to tell a story. So this is going to be a little success story of Compass. So a little background on Compass. Just we started the company in 2013. We originally were a home-based provider in New Hampshire. 2017 is when we moved to a clinic model. In 2018, we opened the public school I told you about, Compass Academy. And even though I told you we had a bunch of people who expressed interest, we did not get the enrollment. We only got 2 or 3 clients. And I was like, I thought you had a bunch of students you wanted to send. What is the problem? And the problem was transportation. They couldn't find a special needs transport provider who could handle the behaviors issues of the children riding on the buses or the vans. And so I'm a business guy. I see opportunity. When I heard that, I said, okay, what's it going to take to become a special needs transport provider in the state of New Hampshire? So what I found out was you need to have Department of Transportation certified school bus drivers. What does that mean? They have to take a 12-hour course from a certified trainer. They need to pass a physical and a drug test and, of course, have a license. You need to have a transportation vehicle that's certified as a school bus. That can be a 12-passenger van. That's what we standardized on. We had Ford Transit vans. No CDL license is required for this. It's your regular driver's license will work. And you needed to have demonstrated standard operating procedures to do daily inspections of the vehicles, pre-ride and post-ride. And you needed liability insurance. But guess what? If you follow all these steps, the only increase to your liability insurance is the cost of adding the vehicle to your policy. That's it. If you're following this level of certification and standards, you can do this. So let me tell you how this evolved. 6 weeks later, we had our van. So we started off, and I'm going to give you a little geography lesson in the state of New Hampshire. So we started off with our first student. We had a van, we had a driver, we had an RBT on the van, we had 1 student. And this student was going, it's about a 1-hour round trip. So If you look, I don't know, it might not be that easy to see. In the middle of the state, there's a star. That's Concord. That's the state capital. That's where our headquarters for Compass was. Manchester was about 30 minutes south, almost due south. So it took about an hour round trip for the van to leave the clinic, go pick up the child in the morning, bring him back to the clinic. Then we got a second student who was from a different area of the state called Salem, and that's more down on the bottom right. So it's a different freeway. There's no way you could go to both places in 1 hour, which meant we had to get another van, another driver, another RBT for one student. But we were bringing in $2,000 a week just for the cost of the driver and the RBT for a couple hours a day and the fuel. So it was, you can see that if you scale this up. So, but these vans had one student. We had 9 empty seats in these vans, and that seems silly to me. So I thought, well, here's what's going on. We look at our utilization in the clinic. And for those of you who don't know me well enough, I harp on this all the time. The number one barrier to being profitable as an ABA business is having underutilized hours, authorized hours, underutilization. A lot of the people who I'm working with are averaging 50 to 60% utilization. You need to get that. If you're a clinic provider, you need to be at 90% or better. What is the main reason that people are not able to get to the clinic? Transportation. So I thought, well, why don't we give free transportation to the Medicaid families to remove that barrier? And so we filled up those vans, and they were all coming. We specialized in working in comprehensive cases. Most of our kids were there 40 hours a week. And so, that was high utilization. We removed that barrier, and the parents were really appreciative of that. So then the word started getting out because we had 3 clinic locations. We were only doing vans in Concord. Now all the other clinics are saying, hey, we want that too. And you see the number 2 there, that's Keene. That's on the Vermont border. It's a very rural, poor part of the state. Everybody in that county was Medicaid. We had 2 vans full of Medicaid kids coming to the clinic and getting all those hours. Then the commercial insurance clients wanted in. So we had a couple empty seats on some of the vans, and the people who had Blue Cross, they said, hey, can we get in on this? We said, okay, but we didn't think it was fair to give them for free, so we charged them a nominal rate. But we filled those vans. Now, here's where it got really interesting. The school districts who were paying us to transport kids to our school said, you're the only transportation provider who's been able to handle these really difficult cases. Would you be willing to transport kids to other schools? And I said, absolutely. They said, you can name your price. I said, okay, my price is $400 a day per student. So we got a 7th van, and that 7th van brought in more money than all the other 6 vans did. So this is a really interesting model, but if you think about it, we are well positioned to be able to offer this kind of service, and it's very, very lucrative, and it's very stable income. So for our business model, the tangible impacts: increased revenue from a non-insurance source of funding. When we sold Compass in 2021, 35% of our revenue came from non-insurance sources. And I think we could have done better if we had kept at it a couple more years. But I was afraid that I was going to go completely lose all my hair. We increased our client census count for the comprehensive cases because we were able to remove a big barrier. And of course, we increased our utilization. Our average utilization when we sold the company was 93%. Intangible impacts, this gave us a huge competitive advantage. No one else was offering this. The reputation and relationships with our school districts, I told you it used to be contentious, now they loved us. And the parents, of course, were very grateful. So I would encourage you, this is a really interesting area to pursue, and I'm happy to talk with you about it. Okay, now I'm going to move into, I want to just keep an eye on time. I think we're doing pretty well. Okay, so I have a couple of, these are a little bit more out there, but I think that these are areas where I really want to encourage you to think out of the box. So the first one is adult services, and specifically, every state has a department called the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, or we'll call it VR for short. And they are measured on their ability to provide employment for individuals with a disability, whether that's autism or other type of intellectual disabilities. And there are people out there that provide job coaching and they contract to the Department of Voc Rehab, but they don't know how to handle these types of individuals. They don't have the skills to manage behaviors and to teach these types of individuals who have these disabilities. This is tailor-made for people who have an ABA background. ABA providers can become vendors to Voc Rehab and be able to provide pre-employment support and supported employment programs. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what these look like. And we didn't do this ourselves at Compass, but this is something that we are working with some of our clients to investigate now. So what is the problem? If we're looking at what the problem is, and I love talking about KPIs, and it's important to understand what are Voc Rehab departments measured on in terms of KPIs. So you have to speak their language, first of all, and understand their problem. And what they're measured on is that they need to get people jobs. But the people who they generally work with don't have the skills to enable these individuals to stay in jobs. They might get placed, but they lose their job within 3 months. So the solution is there is something called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which sets some standards for performance indicators. And if you can help the Department of Voc Rehab to improve their numbers and these KPIs, you would be a very highly valued partner to them. Now, why am I talking about this group? I can tell you that last week, my wife is a board member of FABA, which is the Florida ABA organization for the state. And last year, there was a talk given by somebody from the Department of Voc Rehab, and he said, I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in my budget, and I don't have any vendor to spend it with. He was begging ABA providers to come and apply for contracts because they could not accommodate and they could not meet their KPIs. The need is there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are those 6 KPIs and how can you pitch to them, right? So number 1 is they look at employment, both 6 months after a placement in a job and 12 months after placement in a job. And the percentage of people who still have a job after those 2 measurement periods are numbers that they're being tracked against. So if you can help an individual to understand the social skills necessary to perform well in a job and provide some support for behavioral issues during the employment period, that will help those numbers go up, and that will be of high value to the Voc Rehab group. Median earnings, credential attainment, if they can get a high school diploma or some type of a certification during that first year of employment, that's something they get measured on. Measurable skill gains, this is a key one, because what does that involve? It involves taking data. This is something that ABA practitioners do every day. You know how to take data, you know how to measure improvement and performance. So it's a great opportunity for somebody with ABA skill sets to go and help these individuals and help the Department of Voc Rehab to hit their numbers. That will be of great value to them. So where does ABA fit in here? There's a few different offerings. And my reading glasses aren't on me right now, so I'm going to do my best to try and get through this. But the pre-employment transition services, so 15% of their budget is targeted at children who are still in school. So there's a great opportunity to do social skills groups at a school, to be able to do job training or other types of vocational training skills in a school environment. There's budget for it. Social skills groups help teach them skills to be able to interact with other employees in the company. Job retention support and job coaching with BCA supervision. If an employee with a disability is struggling at work and is escalating in the break room, for example, a BCBA could be called in to do a behavior plan and to provide some training. So these are the types of things that you already do every day with children. If you can take that same skill set and apply it. One thing that we used to hear a lot when we talk with, and when we used to own our own company, was, oh, that's outside of my domain of expertise, so that's beyond my scope of practice. I'll tell you what my wife's answer to that always was. What are you going to do to make it within your scope of practice? What resource, what journal articles are you going to read? What mentors are you going to find? Get help. It's out there. We can help you. There's lots of people out here who can help you. But this is a great opportunity to work with a population that maybe you're not that comfortable with, or maybe your clinicians aren't that comfortable with. But help them get comfortable, because not only will you be doing a great service for these people, because as far as insurance companies are concerned, autism is automatically cured after you're 21 years old, right? And we all know that's not true. This is another way that you can help that population and get paid for it handsomely. So where do you go in your state? So you need to find the vendor manual. You know, I have some steps here, and again, you'll be able to download these slides, but just Google and look for your state and the voc rehab service fee schedule. Look for these specific codes for behavioral support. Look for the rates and identify who the vendor coordinator is. That's the person you want to get to know. Then you want to go and outreach your organization. Talk about what can you do as a vendor? What unique skills do you have? Here's why I'm better than the job coaches you're using today, because I have a strong expertise in working with this population, and we know how to teach them the skills they need to be successful and stay in a job. And then propose a pilot. Give us 3 to 5 of your most difficult cases and pay us to work with them and see if we can help them stay in a job for 6 months, for 12 months. And let's just take data on that. And you want to make sure that for that pilot program, you do a fantastic job. You go over the top, taking great data, showing those kinds of outcomes, turning them into a marketable case study, and then you can go and use that to be able to further your cause. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is foster care, and this actually is the one that I'm the most excited about. So in a very similar way, every state has a means of dealing with children who are in a foster care system. And unfortunately, you know, the autism rates that are climbing, they are climbing for every population, including foster children. So it's in a constant state of crisis. And it's primarily driven because it's difficult to find parents, particularly of children with these types of disabilities. It's difficult to find a family that they can be placed with that will be a successful placement. And that's the #1 KPI that foster care agencies are measured on: placement stability. How long will the child be able to stay with this family or be reunified with the biological family? So what an ABA provider can provide is placement stabilization. So there can be a combination of different things. In-depth parent training on with ABA practices for potential foster parents who are going to be taking in a child with autism or with other types of intellectual disabilities. So the ABA providers can provide placement stabilization to position themselves as an alternative to sending, if a placement fails, these children typically get placed back in residential. Wouldn't it be nice if a BCBA could instead go in, monitor the situation, create a behavior plan, provide some foster parent training? These are all things that you do every single day. You know how to do this. Applying it in this context is something that your competitors aren't doing. It's something that the PE companies are not doing. This is a great opportunity to help a population that really needs it and allows you to get paid for doing really good work. So again, defining the problem and the KPIs for foster care. They are primarily measured on safety and the permanency of a placement, whether that's with a foster family or with a biological family. So the federal government is overseeing that. There are metrics that have to be measured against. So the core problem is the disruption cycle. So foster parents go through a set of training. It's very generic training, and it doesn't teach anything about how to handle special needs children. So it doesn't have any practical tools for managing behavior. Then there's behavioral escalation. So the child gets placed, the parents have not received adequate training, the child escalates, and then the parents say, I can't handle this, you need to take the child back. So it's a failed placement. This is the cycle that you see in foster care all the time. So what do they care about? The core KPIs that child welfare cares about. One is placement stability. They look at the rate of placement moves per 1,000 days. So the lower that number, the lower the number of times a child moves around, the better. High turnover is bad. They look at reentry into foster care, the percent of children returning within 12 months of reunification with the biological family. This measures if the home was fixed. Number 3 is maltreatment in care. And unfortunately, without appropriate training and things like safety care for foster parents, sometimes they get overwhelmed and horrible things can happen because they're just overwhelmed. Time to permanency, the time to get a child out of the system, whether it's to be reunified or to get adopted or to go to some kind of guardianship. And then kinship care utilization is another thing they measure. Placement with relatives. And again, sometimes children end up with an aunt or an uncle, but though they don't have any training in how to handle this either. So you can see the opportunities here are for training and for crisis management. Those are the two biggest areas of potential in the area of foster care. So where does ABA fit? Okay, so I've kind of alluded to this, but I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So acute placement stabilization. A child is placed, a child is escalating, the foster parents can't handle it, have the BCBA SWAT team go in. And you can charge the agency for this service, and you might come up with a price that's reasonable for that time. But essentially to go in, do an analysis of the situation, write a behavior plan, teach and model for the parents, and then do some ongoing check-ins. That's a service that you can charge good money for. Behavioral training for foster parents and kinship parents. So again, giving a real in-depth parent training. This is something you could do for like a group of foster parents coming to the agency in a conference room, and you offer this on a monthly basis. And you could teach them things like the basics of ABA, how to handle, what reinforcement, how to handle antecedent management before the behaviors escalate. All these things that don't get taught today that would make a huge help. Reunification support and a prevention vendor. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on those, but the idea is, providing ongoing parent coaching. This is something that we already do in the insurance world. Why not do it here? And then the last one, evidence-based practices under the I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but that's the law that they have to follow. Again, what is ABA great at? Data collection. It's very easy to be able to show trends and to use that data to to help the agency show the quality of the outcomes. So how do you get into this in your state? Now this is a little different. For the voc rehab world, it's almost the same in every state. There's a centralized agency. It's run by the state government. Foster care is all over the map, and depending on what your state. In Florida, it's county-based. But in Tennessee, I think, is where my other client I'm working with is. It's all run by the state at a state agency level. So you need to understand in your state, you'll have to Google and find out how is foster care managed in your state, and then you have to come up with a game plan based on how that works. So if it's state-run, or if it's county-run, or if it's privatized, and then find the manual for how to support that system, and then follow the funding. So there is money out there, and depending on your state and the situation, it might be in Florida, it's Medicaid, but it's a completely different pocket of Medicaid than for ABA therapy in the insurance model. There's a whole other budget out there that can be leveraged for the foster care model. And there's also contract dollars out there. If let's say in Florida, for example, each county contracts with a private company to oversee foster care. Those companies it's in their best interest to make sure that their KPIs are great, and they have money to be able to spend with vendors like yourselves to be able to increase the outcomes. So those are the people that you want to follow. And then you go for your pilot pitch. So again, I find the right contact person, explain what you can do to help them, show them that you understand their problem, the KPIs that they're trying to place, and then you say, give us 3 of your kids that you're struggling with the most, and give us a chance to prove what we can do. And you make sure you do a fantastic job with those first 3, and then there'll be dozens more following it. Okay, so I think I have a lot of time left for, I don't know how late this is supposed to go to, but if you want to download my slides, there's the QR code. I'll leave it up for a while, and I'll be happy to take questions. Yes? I don't know if, yeah. I don't know if you, oh, he's got a mic for you.
Hi, I'll be sitting for my BCBA exam soon, so my question to you is, how do you go about getting school contracts? I'm not familiar, so I just wanted to know how, do you go through an agency? Do you contact the district itself?
Yeah, all my experience, and so if you couldn't hear it, the question is, how do you get school contracts? I like the personal touch. I build a relationship with the special ed director and the superintendent. Those are the 2 main people in a school district that you should talk to. I will say this, my best experience working with school districts was working with rural school districts, not with larger cities. They tend to want to hire their own, in my experience, they tend to want to hire their own staff. So I feel bad for those BCBAs because they have the consult model, and you'll have one BCBA who has 200 kids on her caseload, and she'll see them twice a year for a half hour. And that's what they call ABA. One way to build that relationship is if you're working with students who have an IEP, go to the IEP meetings. Always volunteer to go to the IEP meetings and be supportive. Don't be combative. Some BCBAs make that mistake. They think that, and I'm not going to generalize, but I've seen that happen. But in our experience, if the BCBA provides very valuable input to an IEP meeting as part of the team and works collaboratively, the special ed directors will take notice of that. And when they might actually reach out to you. But if they don't, you reach out to them and say, we'd really like to get more involved. We'd love to help you. I think we've demonstrated that we're very collaborative. We want to work with you. And that is a great way to do it. Special ed director. Yes.
Hello. So my question is, what is your recommendation in regards to insurance-based funding, like percentage-wise, to alternative revenue opportunities?
Wow, that is a great question. Well, I can tell you that like I said, we ended up at about 35%, and I wish it was more. If it was up to me, I would make alternative revenue streams the primary, and insurance much less so, because of just all of the overhead required, all of all of the things that you didn't sign up for if you're a BCBA and having to deal with writing these treatment plans and doing the SOAP notes and making sure every claim is accurate and it's all great in terms of being able to do all of that, but the overhead that it brings in, and the fact is, at the end of the day, let's just be honest, insurance companies are not motivated to pay you. They want to hang on to that money as long as they can. They will, if you're a subscriber, they will ding you if you are late on a payment, but they are going to take their time paying the providers. And that just rubs me the wrong way. I really don't like the insurance model here. And so, there's no really a good answer to that question, but I would say the more the better. That's honestly, I think the more diversified you are in any industry, it just reduces your risk across the board.
Did you ever think about creating a DDD program, like for 21 and up?
I'm sorry, I'm still having trouble understanding. A DVD,
Like a developmental disabilities program, like a day habilitation center. Did you ever consider that? And if so,
doing
why did you not?
in other words, to do like a special needs daycare? Is that what you mean?
Like a day program, like for 21 and up.
Oh.
Not a day, yeah.
Okay. I have not considered that. I mean, I think that's a very admirable thing to investigate, but I can't say I have any experience with looking into that. I think it's a great idea, though. I mean, I think the question is, where does the funding come from? So if you can develop a relationship with, a Voc Rehab or an agency like that that oversees, I mean, in my experience, most adults, after they age out of the insurance program, there's very limited funding available. So I think the challenge is always, how do you go about providing services in a way that will make you money?
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I'll leave my contact details if anybody wants to have follow-up questions with me. But aside from that, thank you so much for your time today.